Hello friends, Steve Stockton here with you. In this video, we're going to be discussing some strange wilderness disappearances you may never have heard of. So sit back, relax, and let the stories begin. Now, for some, a walk in the wilderness can be the perfect getaway from everyday life and a chance to reconnect with Mother Nature. For others, the great outdoors can be a dangerous place, and unfortunately, is a place where many people meet their end or just mysteriously vanish. Here are 4 such cases for you to consider. Number 4, Brian Sholinski. 40-year-old Brian Sholinski was at a turning point in his life. He was admittedly in the midst of a midlife crisis and was desperately seeking answers and a purpose in his life. He told CBS Denver, "I was trying to find motivation for the next 40 years of my life. I wanted to exert myself. I didn't want to go to the extremes that I did." In a bid to clear his head and reconnect with nature, Brian headed out into the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. What should have been a life-changing expedition almost turned into a tragedy. On February 11th, Brian entered the Great Sand Dunes National Park, headed for the Coal Creek drainage area, which would have seen him hiking 10 miles around the perimeter of the park. Coal Creek drainage is located at the base of Mount Harold and would have provided Brian with spectacular views and the perfect amount of quiet time to clear his head. Sometime into his walk, the conditions changed, however, and he began to encounter snowdrifts. Any other person would probably have turned around and headed back to their car, but Brian had other ideas. In an interview with CBS Denver, he says, "I said, this isn't going to stop me. 3 feet of snow, 3 feet isn't going to stop me. 4 feet isn't going to stop me. I'm going to keep going. Why? I couldn't tell you." Unfortunately, this mistake would almost cost Brian his life. After becoming stranded, Brian soon realized the mistake he had made. He had no shelter, no extra clothing, and only 2 small meals meant to sustain him for 1 day. As the sun rose on the 2nd day, Brian desperately tried to continue his fight to find his way home. The freezing temperatures and snow did little to help, of course, and by the 3rd day, he had to cut the laces and tongues out of his boots as they had frozen over. Now, with damaged boots, no food, no water, no warm clothes, Brian carried on walking. To make matters worse, Brian had gotten lost and had found himself on the sand dunes. His absence hadn't gone unnoticed, though, and by the 5th day of him being missing, rangers from the park noticed that his car had been parked there an unusually long time. After failing to make contact with the owner, they set about looking for him. Park rangers, along with volunteers, horse and aerial units, began scanning the park, looking for any sign of the missing man, but there was nothing to be seen. Sniffer dogs were even brought in, and while his footprints and scent were found, Brian wasn't. As the 5th day was drawing to a close, the outlook was looking very bleak for Brian, and his chance of survival was growing slimmer and slimmer by the minute. Then, a miracle happened. He told CBS Denver, "I'd given up on my mission to the stars. I saw a road, and that's when I was discovered by rescuers." He was escorted to the Great Sand Dunes Visitor Center and said, "I walk in there and I see a picture of myself on the bulletin board and a map. To be honest with you, I didn't even think people were looking for me." It was a miracle. Brian had been found alive and well after surviving for 5 days in below freezing temperatures without food, water, shelter, or adequate clothing. His extremities had suffered from frostbite, but he refused to accept medical treatment. Instead, all he asked of his rescuers was to help him get back home to New York. Brian's story doesn't end there, though. This wouldn't be the last time he would disappear into the wilderness. In early May 2017, Brian Sholinski would hit the headlines once again when he disappeared from the Great Sand Dunes National Park and Preserve. According to reports, Brian went missing, and again, park rangers discovered his car in a picnic area and tried to track him down. When they failed to do so, they got together a search and rescue team. But this time, the outcome wasn't so bright. Unfortunately, bad weather prevented the search teams from conducting a thorough search, and on June 28, 2017, Brian's body was discovered, covered with deep snow. Number 3, Randy Rasco. On November 19, 2015, park rangers at the Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky noticed that a car had been sitting in the car park for around 2 weeks. This immediately set off warning bells, and after doing some digging for information, they discovered that the car belonged to 40-year-old Randy Rasco. As the car had been there for quite some time, the park rangers set about searching for Randy right away. But when he couldn't be found in or near the parking area, they opened an investigation and widened their search. Park rangers and investigators contacted Randy's family to see if they had spoken to him, but chillingly, they had been out of contact for a few months. According to his sister Sherry, up until May 2015, everything was normal. On a regular basis, he was doing his normal things, hunting, fishing, and kept in contact with our brother who lived close to his Bowling Green apartment. Then one day out of the blue, he packed up his belongings, quit his job, and had his mail forwarded to another address, and just left. Sherry said they filed a missing persons report after they found out he had just fled and were worried as he had recently gotten divorced. For a month, the Rasco family waited for any news, and in June, he was found safe and sound in Washington State. Randy made it clear that he didn't want to speak to his family at that time and wanted to be alone. As painful as it was, his family respected his boundaries and assured him they would welcome him back with open arms whenever he was ready. For the next few months, it's believed that Randy traveled all around the U.S., all while maintaining his privacy and secrecy. His family didn't know that anything was wrong until the Mammoth Cave National Park Rangers contacted them to let them know that his car had been found abandoned. With this second disappearance, his family hoped that there would be a positive resolution. But sadly, as of 2022, Randy Rasco is still missing. Search crews, volunteers, and even the Civil Air Patrol all joined in on the search for Randy, scouring the over 53,000 acres of land in the park. Despite their best efforts and multiple searches, no sign of Randy has ever been found, and his car is the only clue we have in terms of his mysterious disappearance. Randy Rasco is described as a white male, 6 foot 2 inches tall, with black hair, hazel eyes, and a slim, athletic build. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Mammoth Cave National Park at 270-758-2180. Number 2, Maureen Kelly. 19-year-old Maureen Kelly embarked on what she thought would be a spiritual adventure of a lifetime. However, this adventure quickly turned sour, and she's been missing ever since. On June 19th of 2013, Maureen and a group of friends arrived at the Canyon Creek Campground in the Gifford-Pinchot National Park in Washington State, ready to camp and hang out together and have a good time. The friends were relaxing and taking in the natural beauty of the park when Maureen abruptly announced that she was going on a spiritual adventure. She took off all of her clothes, removed her shoes, and was equipped with nothing but a fanny pack that is believed to have held a pocket knife, a compass, and a few matches. After declaring that she was going on a spiritual adventure, Maureen headed out into the woods, never to be seen again. Maureen didn't tell her friends how long she was going to be or even where she was headed, but they figured she would be back at least within a few hours to tell them all about her spiritual journey. As darkness rolled in and Maureen still hadn't returned, a group of friends alerted the Skamania County Sheriff's Office, and she was officially reported missing. There were added concerns about her welfare due to the fact that she'd left without clothes, shoes, food, and water, and within hours, a huge search and rescue mission began. Volunteers, park rangers, and search and rescue coordinators combed through the park, looking for any sign of her. But despite their best efforts, it was as if she had vanished into thin air. One clue did surface, however, and as search teams were looking on the ground, they came across footprints, bare footprints, that were the same size as Maureen's feet. Working on this singular clue, sniffer dogs were brought in an attempt to trace her scent, but due to the rainfall, they were unable to pick up anything. The footprints showed that Maureen had perhaps headed north towards Forest Service 54 Road, but as previously mentioned, the trail ended where the road began. Helicopters were brought in, but they were unable to search for Maureen in the initial hours and days following her disappearance due to severe weather conditions. 19-year-old Maureen Kelly remains missing, and the Skamania County Sheriff's Office is still no closer to finding out what happened to her. Many believe that she succumbed to the elements that very night, but as her body has never been found, nobody knows for sure. Maureen is described as an Asian Pacific Islander with black hair, brown eyes. She stands 5 foot 7 inches tall and weighs about 150 pounds. Anyone with any information is asked to please contact the Skamania County Sheriff's Office at 509-427-9490 and reference case number 13-04081. Number 1. Cat Hamre. On April 11, 2019, 68-year-old Cat Hamre, her dog Tootsie, her husband, her daughter, and a group of other hikers set off into the San Felipe Desert in Baja California, Mexico. The group were either headed for or near the Diablo Canyon, when tragedy struck. In this community, we know all about places with devil in the name. According to the Seattle Times, Kate had lived in Mexico for the past 20 years and would often make the trip to Seattle, Washington to visit her friends and family. The details surrounding Kat's disappearance are sparse, but here is what we do know. According to Kat's daughter, Desiree Blair, about 10 minutes into the hike, Kat complained that she had hurt her foot or ankle and told the group that she would take a quick break while they continued on. Her husband later commented that the injury seemed severe, and he believed that Kat may have actually broken her foot or ankle. The group left Kat and her dog Tootsie behind as they made their way to the waterfall, and as they circled back around, Kat was nowhere to be found. Her husband, Warren Sundquist, went and waited at their car, thinking that perhaps she had headed there, but she never showed up. Hours passed, and there was no sign of Kat. The group and her family reported her missing. Kat was very familiar with the area and showed no concerns about being left alone while the others finished their hike. She also apparently showed no signs of distress, making her disappearance all the more mystifying. After Kat was reported missing, search and rescue crews, volunteers, and even the Mexican armed forces all pitched in to help find her, but as of 2022, no trace has ever been found. The authorities in San Felipe did believe at one point that someone in the hiking group may have been responsible, however, although everyone present was questioned and no charges have ever been brought about. One theory suggests that Kat perhaps stumbled across cartel activity and that she was taken out for what she saw. Another theory is that Kat was attacked by a wild animal, but the first attending officers noted that the scene was devoid of any signs of a struggle and there was no blood. As of this recording, in March of 2022, Cat Hamre and her dog, Tootsie, remain missing, and her family are desperate for answers. Anyone with any information is asked to contact the San Felipe Police Department at 686-577-1134. Eric Richard Beeler. Pam and Eric Beeler were described as a couple that were almost fused together, choosing to live their lives almost as one. The pair had met in 1989, and by 1990, the two had gotten married. Eric and Pam dreamed of living a more remote and rural lifestyle and decided to pack up their things and spend their time traveling through the U.S., looking for the perfect hideaway from the outside world. Eric worked as an artist, creating beautiful posters and pieces, while Pam had recently lost her mother to cancer and had previously devoted all of her time to her care. After getting married, Pam and Eric moved to a quiet part of Vermont, but this was far from the isolation they had been craving. After pondering where to go next, Eric and Pam finally settled on the shore of Lisiansky Inlet, close to the small Alaskan village of Pelican. This inlet meant they were almost completely cut off from the outside world, save for a small boat that would take them into the village. Eric and Pam thrived in their new environment, creating water collection systems and living off the land as much as they could. Those in Pelican who knew Pam and Eric described them as happy and warm, and the pair would regularly travel to Pelican for art and music events. When these events weren't happening, it wasn't uncommon for weeks to go by without the couple venturing into town, but the townsfolk had grown to realize that Pam and Eric were more than capable of taking care of themselves. Then, in the 2000s, the couple received some devastating news. Pam was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis, a condition that causes the immune system to attack the spinal cord and brain. Sadly, the outlook for MS sufferers is often bleak, with severe pain and damage being the two main symptoms. In 2022, treatments for MS sufferers are much better than they were in the 2000s, although research into the condition still has a long way to go. For some sufferers, the disease limits their lives and can often decrease their lifespan. Pam and Eric knew that the outlook of this diagnosis was bleak and began to retreat into themselves even further. By 2018, Pam's condition was almost unmanageable, and while the Beelers tried to keep up good impressions, those closest to them knew that something wasn't quite right. Eugene Solovyov, who runs the Sitka Art Gallery, had known Eric and Pam for many years, and Eric had regularly given him his hand-carved wooden items to display and sell. Eugene revealed that for years, Eric had told him that when Pam's condition became too much, the pair planned to opt out. Pam could not bear to live with the condition anymore, and Eric could not bear to live without his wife. September 12, 2018, was the last time that Eric and Pam Beer were ever seen alive. The two left their home and headed for their summer cabin on the outer coast of Jacobi Island, close to Pelican Bay. Weeks went by without any contact from the couple. Neither Eric nor Pam had made the trip into town to gather supplies, and Eric had not visited the Sitka Gallery to deliver more intricate hand carvings. It wasn't unusual for the two to be unheard of for weeks, but as a month since their last contact was slowly approaching, two friends decided to check on the couple. On October 10, 2018, two concerned friends made the journey to the Beelers' isolated cabin, only to be met by a note. The cabin had been completely abandoned, and the note taped to the front door read, "To the world and all concerned, this is to officially notify you that Eric and Pam Beer, of their own choice and own free will, have opted out. We have gone to some effort to hide our bodies, as we do not want them found. Please do not waste time and money looking. It would serve no purpose. We are gone. Leave us to our peace. Yes, we have taken the dog with us, and we set the chickens free." Their belongings had been neatly boxed up, and there were a series of letters addressed to various friends and family members. Eric and Pam had also left behind handwritten wills asking those who had discovered the abandoned cabin to donate Eric's art to the gallery. They also requested that the proceeds from the sale of their property and anything inside should be donated to the Sitka Conservation Society. Friends and family members were devastated by the news, understandably, and the Alaskan state troopers opened an investigation. In the few months before their disappearance, Eric and Pam had spoken to a financial advisor about their wills, and the advisor told the troopers that there was no indication of what was to come. Eugene, the owner of the gallery, had attempted to talk to Eric multiple times, and some articles mentioned that Eric and Pam's family members were possibly aware of Eric's plans. Jonathan Taylor, an Alaskan State Trooper spokesperson, told KTOO, "I did not locate any sign of Pamela or Eric from the air or on the ground. We have not found any evidence or indication as to where they might be. And given the very clear nature of the notes that were left behind, it seems apparent that we might not actually be able to help them." The search for Pam and Eric Beer was officially suspended, and the couple was declared deceased in absentia a year later in June 2019. Those who knew and loved the Beelers still have many questions that linger, and likely their bodies will never be found. If you or anyone you know is struggling with thoughts like these, please reach out. You're not alone, and there are hundreds of support networks available. Here are some numbers that you can call for help. In the U.S., 1-800-273-8255. In the UK, 116-123 or 999. In New Zealand, 1737. Mexico, 55-5259-8121. Ireland, 116-123. France, 3114. Germany, 112. Canada, 1-833-456-4566. And in Australia, 131114. You are loved and cared about. Number 4, Fred Frond. 49-year-old Fred Frond was last seen at the Timberline Lodge on March 2, 2003 at around 10 a.m. Fred had planned to go snowshoeing to Hogsback on Mount Hood, a ridge that sits at an elevation of around 10,400 to 11,000 feet in the state of Oregon. His wife, Marion, and his 2 children were waiting for him, and before he left, he told his wife that he would be back at the parking lot by 5 p.m., and that if he wasn't there, she could assume that something had gone terribly wrong. Fred's last words served as an eerie prediction of what was to come. As 5 p.m. came around and there was no sign of Fred in the parking lot, Marion began to panic. With snow raining down from the skies and temperatures plummeting, she knew she had to act fast. The Clackamas County, Oregon Sheriff's Department was called in and the search for Fred began. By the next morning, over 50 search and rescue and law enforcement personnel had arrived to help search for Fred. An article for the Oregonian notes that the searchers moved through the wilderness, blowing whistles and air horns and following shoe prints. Witnesses were interviewed who placed Fred on Mount Hood sometime on the afternoon he disappeared. Searchers battled with the harsh conditions to keep on searching, and the National Guard's air ambulance was forced to call off their search after the weather became too severe. As snowstorms moved in and out of the area, searchers went back into the wilderness hoping to find any sign of Fred, but there was nothing there. By March 27, 2003, the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office had officially called off the search, telling the Associated Press, "We have determined that the likelihood of his survivability is down to nothing, and for us to send those people out in these conditions would only put them in harm's way. The snow is coming down at approximately 4 inches an hour. The avalanche danger is extreme. There are whiteout conditions at about 5,000 feet, and my resource groups are exhausted." Fred's family were understandably devastated when the search was called off and would tell investigators that while Fred was an experienced mountaineer, he had little to no winter experience. Also, on the day that Fred disappeared, he had declined to take his phone or an MLU, which is a mountain locator unit, which transmits a signal should the hiker become lost. Marion said, "He would rather get somewhere on foot than travel by any sort of machine because he likes the independence of it and to be where other people aren't. He doesn't like using electronics or equipment." Authorities believe that if Fred had been carrying an MLU or PLB, he would have likely been found within hours of him going missing. Alongside not carrying a GPS tracker or any kind of electronic equipment, Fred was also poorly prepared for the conditions and a possible overnight stay on Mount Hood. According to the Charlie Project, all he was carrying was some apples and 2 water bottles. With heavy snowfall and strong winds reaching over 100 miles an hour, it's unlikely that Fred survived the night on Mount Hood, but no sign of his remains has ever been found. There was a glimmer of hope for Fred's family in August of 2003 when remains were found in the Zigzag Canyon area on Mount Hood. Initially, it was revealed that these remains belonged to Fred based on the items of clothing recovered. However, just days later, this statement was retracted, saying that they belonged to another young man. This announcement once again brought up those painful memories for the Fronds, and as of 2022, Fred remains missing. Fred Frond is described as a white male with brown hair and wears glasses. He was last seen carrying some apples and 2 water bottles and was wearing a Gore-Tex jacket and pants. Anyone with any information, or if you might have seen Fred prior to his going missing, please contact the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office at 503-655-8218. Number 3, Kenneth Eldon Funk. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information available about who Kenneth Eldon Funk was as a person, and there are very few articles or websites that even mention his disappearance. It appears as though Kenneth's disappearance has been lost to time. Could say the disappearance has disappeared. But while the world might not have known his name before, we hope they do now. 57-year-old Kenneth Eldon Funk worked as a slot machine technician at the Sunset Station Hotel in Henderson, Nevada. Kenneth was married and the couple had 3 children, and from the information given, it appears as though they were a normal, happy family. On June 19, 2004, Kenneth, his wife, and the family ventured down to Lake Mead, situated just outside the confines of the Las Vegas City Lights. What should have been a day filled with family fun quickly turned into a nightmare. As the family were boating on the water, a large wave struck the boat, sending Kenneth's wife overboard. At the time of the incident, she was not wearing a life jacket, so Kenneth grabbed one and jumped into the lake after to try and save her. Unfortunately, Kenneth had severely underestimated the power of the waters below, and both he and his wife were split up from their boat within minutes. With a strong gust pushing the boat further out in the water, all the pair could do was tread water and wait to be saved. After 40 minutes had passed, Kenneth told his wife to let go. This was the last time Kenneth was ever seen again. Thankfully, Kenneth's wife, who was not named in any of the articles we found, was rescued by park rangers in the hours after her ordeal, as the other family members on the lake that day had flagged them down. By the time she was rescued and park rangers began looking for Kenneth, he was simply gone. Authorities believe, naturally, that he may have drowned, but the circumstances surrounding Kenneth's disappearance just don't quite make sense. We don't know why Kenneth told his wife to let go when help was just around the corner. Kenneth Eldon Funk is described as a white male with brown hair and brown eyes, standing approximately 5 foot 11 inches tall and weighing 210 pounds. He was last seen wearing a swimsuit, and anyone with any information, or if you may have seen Kenneth on that day, you're asked to please contact the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department at 702-828-3111 and reference case number 120-223-2179. Number 2. David Bird Thompson. David Bird Thompson lived a wild and varied life. In 1969, he left his home in Hopkins, Minnesota, and went to Vietnam as a United Press International correspondent. According to the website Find Dave, which was created by his youngest brother, David suffered an accident sometime in 1962 or 1964, which left him with a shortened left leg, a shortened left arm, and a shattered left shoulder. These injuries saw him classified as disabled. However, the Army still allowed David to sign up under the order that he would only be placed into a combat role if it was absolutely necessary. David had always had a keen interest in journalism, and after the war was over, he lived in various European countries, all while continuing to write. In 1979, Dave's book, In the Shining Mountains, was published, but before he could enjoy any of the success that came with it, he disappeared. According to his younger brother, Dave had been struggling with his mental health in the lead-up to his disappearance. His family reported that he had been suffering from depression along with mild delusions following the loss of his older brother, Mike. His family were deeply concerned for David, but before he could receive any help, it was already too late. According to reports, David was last seen on Highway 7 and Williston Road in Minnetonka, Minnesota, on July 1, 1979. Since then, David has not made contact with his family, and they are still desperately searching for answers. In his blog, Dave's younger brother Peter details how it wasn't unusual for him to go off camping for a while, but when months had passed without any contact, they knew something was horribly wrong. David had been experiencing bizarre delusions, and his family began calling around hospitals and even mental health institutions, wondering whether he had been admitted. Unfortunately, these calls yielded no results, and at one point, David's younger brother even called up with an elaborate Social Security plan to see if David had used his number or had another registered address elsewhere. David's family have never stopped looking for him, as evidenced in the blogs and website posts written by his family members. Numerous psychics have even been contacted over the years, with Dave's family desperate to find any trace of him. What is interesting to note that Dave left behind his second book, The Solar Kid, which was only 3/4 finished. But why would he leave his almost finished book behind? Some have speculated that David may have even wanted to live like the character from his first book, In the Shining Mountains. The Charlie Project summarized the book as being about a man who seeks to live like an old-fashioned mountain man, but finds his dream intruded upon by modern society. So, did David want to live off the grid and away from the struggles and pressures of modern life? Or did something happen to him while he was hitchhiking? We still don't know where David was headed when he was hitchhiking, and over the years there have been precious few viable leads to follow. At one point, David's younger brother Peter began conducting his own investigation, which is chronicled in his blog posts. His family also began to look at John Does in the area and all across the U.S., but so far, no leads have ever come of this. In the final part of his blog, Peter wrote, "In June 2014, I started this website. I'm putting everything I know about Dave's disappearance on it. I hope soon to have a crowdfunding sourcing site to increase the amount of the reward money. The reward would go to the first person to find Dave Thompson. I'm not seeking justice anymore, just closure." David Bird Johnson is described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes, standing approximately 5 foot 9 inches tall, and weighed between 175 and 185 pounds when he went missing. David may go by the names Bird or even Chris, and has the following injuries: a scar on his right elbow, a fractured right arm. His left leg is 3/8 of an inch shorter than the right, and his left arm is shorter than his right due to his shattered left shoulder. David also suffers from scoliosis and was battling depression and was having delusions at the time of his disappearance. Anyone with any information at all, no matter how insignificant it may seem, is asked to please contact the Minnetonka Police Department at 952-939-8500 and reference case number 920000446. And finally, number 1, William Thomas Ukiah Duncan. William Thomas Ukiah Duncan was last seen near Dry Creek, past the Mount Hagen Wildlife Management Area off Mill Creek Road in Anaconda, Montana, on May 27, 2012. Dry Creek is mostly known for its fishing access to the Clark Fork River, and it provides a peaceful escape from the outside world. In the years before his disappearance, William, who goes by Will, had moved to 7th Street in Billings, Montana from Anaconda. His friends and family described him as a keen and experienced outdoorsman who knew how to survive in the wilderness and was always looking for his next big adventure. But when he failed to make contact with his family following his outing in May of 2012, they knew something was wrong. His family recalled to the Billings Gazette how it wasn't unusual for Will to go into the mountains for sometimes months at a time, but this time, in May, he did not call or leave a message to let them know where he was going. A search of his home didn't produce any notes or clues, and when his family tried to call him, they were taken straight to his voicemail, meaning his phone had either been turned off or had run out of battery power. As weeks passed by and there was no word from Will, his family decided to contact the Anaconda Deer Lodge County Law Enforcement Agency to report him officially missing on June 19, 2012. Law enforcement officials, along with personnel from the Pentler Search and Rescue, performed a ground search of Dry Creek, but no clues were found. One article for the Billings Gazette mentions that the Montana Highway Patrol were due to be called in to use their helicopter to scan the area, although it has not been confirmed whether this search ever took place. According to NamUs, Will's truck was found abandoned on Dry Creek Road and had been abandoned for at least 3 weeks before he had been officially reported missing on June 19, 2012. William Thomas Ukiah Duncan is described as a white male with brown hair and blue eyes, stands 5 foot 6 inches tall, and weighs 165 pounds. He may also go by the names William Ukiah Duncan or William W. Duncan. Anyone with any information at all is asked to please contact the Anaconda Deer Lodge County Police Department at 406-563-5241 and reference case number 212-CR-000-3587. Well, friends, there you have it. What do you make of these strange disappearances? I look forward to your ideas, theories, and comments, but please keep it friendly and respectful. Until we meet again, be good to yourselves and each other. Stay safe out there this summer. As for me, I'll see you a little farther on down the trail. I'm Steve Stockton, and I'll talk to you next time.